let me introduce Yvonne, who's the CEO, and then she can provide more details about the others as they speak in our session today. You can't get any better information about the accounting industry and education than the individuals we have here today. Yvonne Hinson is the CEO of the American Accounting Association, and prior to assuming the role in September of 2020, which, wow, that's over 4 years now. How fast has that gone? She served as the academic in residence for the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, and she began her career with this small little accounting firm called Arthur Anderson in Charlotte, North Carolina. Arthur Anderson, as you probably know, is not small, but after returning to the University of Tennessee, which is why she's wearing orange today, to pursue her PhD, Yvonne accepted a position with Wake Forest University there in North Carolina. And during her 18-year career at Wake Forest, she served as a faculty member, director of accountancy, and dean of the Charlotte program. She served on numerous academic and community committees and nonprofit boards, and is the past president of the Federation of Schools of Accountancy, past chair of the AAA Membership Advisory Committee, and past member of the Federal Government Cost Accounting Standards Board. She is currently also a board member of the PhD Project and the North Carolina Association of CPAs. So without further ado, Yvonne, thanks for being here, and I'd love for you to introduce in more detail Karen and George when you find it appropriate. Karen, Yvonne?
Thanks so much, Joe. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. You know, partnerships are something that we are really big on here at the American Accounting Association, and partnering with MBEA is something that we are especially excited about as we go forward. So just want to thank you. I am going to go ahead and introduce George and Karen. They both have very different roles here at the American Accounting Association, but very important roles. So George, I'm going to start with you. George has a very esteemed career. George is a retired partner from Grant Thornton, but he also is an academic. He has a PhD in accounting and has held many, many leadership roles at the AICPA, state society, state CPA society, organizations, and other boards. And we are so very fortunate to have George as the inaugural chair of our board of trustees for the newly formed American Accounting Association Foundation. So George is just a wealth of information on the accounting profession and everything that's going on. He keeps his finger on the pulse at all times. And Karen, so I've known George a long time. Karen, I have not known as long. I met Karen, even though we operated in similar circles here at the American Accounting Association. I met her a little over 4 years ago. Karen has a distinguished career as well. She was in public accounting and then corporate accounting, and then spent 31 years at Bentley University teaching there. And Karen, absolutely, when you think of someone who excels in teaching accounting, that's Karen Osterheld. So we were so very fortunate when she retired that she decided that she would continue her career for a bit and come and help us support faculty and high school teachers, community college teachers around the world. So we thought we would start off today with, can we go ahead and advance the slide?
I tested it before and it worked, and now it's not working. Of course not. All right.
They always do that, especially if it sits there for a while.
Yeah, that's weird stuff. Okay.
Okay, so we thought we would just tell you a little bit about who we are. Joe is right. We are not the American Automobile Association, although we have been mistaken for it before on somebody complaining. And then we talk a little bit about career opportunities, because this is so very important for the students that you all are teaching. A little bit about evolving skill sets and accounting majors and hiring. We're actually going to show you some salary numbers. And then we're going to finish with Karen talking to us about a lot of work that's being done in the pipeline and ways to help put resources into your hands. So who are we? We are a scholarly society. We were founded in 1916, so we are well over 100 years old now. And we have always been primarily an academic accounting association, although if you go back far enough, we were about 50% practitioners and 50% academics. But we have since become more academics. We are moving back to embracing practitioners because we believe that faculty and practitioners should be working together on any issues that practice and academia is facing. And we have, over the last 4 years, begun working a lot more with high schools, community colleges, and I think you're even going to see us start working on some awareness in middle schools. Can you go ahead and advance? There we go. So this is just our mission. I'm not going to go through all of this. I know that we can make the slide deck available to you, but it is to further the discipline and the profession of accounting through education, research, and service. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that through our mission and our vision. And on the next slide, you can see that we really want to make sure that we are not only serving our members, but that we're also serving our community and society. That's really important to us as an association because it's really important to our members as well. Our members are all deeply involved in their communities, their universities, their high schools. And several years ago, we decided that we really needed to think of our vision of being thought leaders in accounting and serving our mission through being an inclusive community, because we realized that we really couldn't accomplish any of our goals unless we had an inclusive community that surrounded us at all times. So next slide. And we have values that we have defined, and these are on our website, that are knowledge, integrity, inclusive community, excellence, innovation, and a prosperous society. And so how do we do this? Well, we do this through our reach. We have 17 special interest sections. So if you really like forensic accounting, we have a section for forensic accounting. We have a governmental and not-for-profit. We have, of course, financial audit. But we do have 17 special interest sections. We also have 17 journals. Our academic faculty at four-year institution members, those members all need to research. So we have 3 association-wide journals and 14 that belong to those special interest sections. We hold a lot of conferences and meetings in a year. As you can see here, Karen runs several of those designed around resources for teachers. And this is an interesting fact. We think for the first time that we can find, now if you go back far enough since we started in 1916, you're dealing with paper membership lists that are written down, but this is the first year in a long time anyway, that we have had over 25% international membership. So we're really starting to draw an international audience as well. Some of it because of the innovative things that we're doing. So George, now I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the foundation.
Thank you, Yvonne. As Yvonne pointed out, we started a foundation a little over a year ago. It's a separate 501c3, but its design and its mission is to support programs that the American Accounting Association is trying to promote. We're not there to supplant programs that were there before, but to grow programs that may not be supported by the current mission. 5 pillars, and I'll focus on the last one first, the 5th bullet there. We're trying to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and that's throughout the academic community, both at the high school level, community college level, college and university level. The other 5 pillars, as you would imagine, one's teaching excellence, research relevance, research that might affect accounting education, as well as accounting practice, and then supporting advanced degrees because, at least in one part, the public accounting profession, we have to support advanced degrees for people to become licensed as CPAs. And obviously for the future teachers in the classroom at the university level, we have to support research and advanced degrees for them to get PhDs to be terminally qualified faculty members. And the part that probably is most important for this discussion as any is the fourth pillar, raising awareness of the accounting profession. And all of us as a community, both educator community and practice community, and those who regulate us are concerned about the pipeline and the future generations of people who are going to be accountants serving the public interest, as well as those who are going to be educating and training accountants, similar to what role high school educators have. One of the two things that I want to mention, and the first one I'll mention today, is a technology-enabled high school accounting course that Joe and I and your MBA senior leadership talked about at dinner a couple of weeks ago. We hope to, in the fall of 2027, if not, hopefully not too much later, launch a technology-enabled high school survey of accounting course that would be driven by the Pathways Commission vision model that we have, I think, on this next slide. Okay. What is accounting? This came out of the Pathways Commission that was about a 3 or 4 year commission in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And on the left is the perception of what accounting is, generally in textbooks also, as we see in high school, that you start with transactions and you end up with financial statements. We want to reverse that. We want that vision to start with what decisions must be made by the stakeholders and constituents who benefit from accounting information for decision making, and move from there, okay, to ultimately good decisions informed by accounting, finance, and other related business disciplines, I should say, that produces information that decision makers use to run corporations and small businesses and not-for-profits and government. Okay. The second item I want to talk about, and it's a plug, but it's too late to enroll. We have about 350 people who are attending a 2-year community college bridge symposium in 14 different cities next Friday, November the 8th, that is. This is supported by the CAQ, Center for Audit Quality, the Deloitte Foundation, PwC, and also obviously the American Association Foundation. And we'll be serving about 350 participants who are 2-year community college students representing underrepresented and underserved communities in 14 different offices throughout the country, 7 PwC and 7 Deloitte. And that's probably one of our first major efforts that we will be doing as the foundation to support the pathways to success in accounting. Turn it back to you, Yvonne.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about career opportunities. You know, I cannot stress just how many opportunities there are. There really are infinite possibilities with an accounting degree. You know, often we hear about people who start out in maybe public accounting or corporate accounting, and they end up starting their own business. There are just so many different paths that you can go down. And in a few minutes, you'll see some of the certifications. It would take me a lot longer to talk through all of them, and I'm not going to talk through those. But what I really want to stress is that there are just infinite possibilities. And that is because of the rapid pace of change that we are in. Every time I talk to somebody new, it seems like they're in a slightly different role than I would have possibly expected. I think about my own alums from over 18 years at Wake Forest University. I look at them on LinkedIn, and their job titles don't look anything like accounting, but it was accounting that gave them the start. So, you know, with all of this change going on in the business world, all of this change going on in our profession, all that does is lead to opportunities. You know, people are often afraid of change, but change really is an opportunity, and it is the only constant in life. And what is happening for us on the next slide, you get to, is that we are seeing that accountants are in every single industry. There is not an industry out there that does not need an accountant. So you can think about the music industry, the sports community. All sports teams have accountants. If you go on the CAQ's website, they have a video on just how many accountants are in the front office of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, you know, you may love football, but not be great at football, not make it to the pros, but you can still get that Super Bowl ring because you can go to work for a football team's managing office, and everybody gets the Super Bowl ring. And you know, students don't often know that. But, you know, we've got some of the industries listed here, and this is pretty all-inclusive, but I really want to draw your attention to the self-employed at the bottom, because with Gen Z, what we are hearing so much is that they want to be entrepreneurs. They want their own business. There is no better place to start than with accounting. I used to always tell my students when I would start teaching an intro to principles class, I would always say, you know, forget about how this will help you in the business world. I want this to help you personally. My hope for you is that if you don't already have it, someday you have lots and lots of money. Please don't invest that money in a company if you don't understand how to read their financial statements, or if you can't read an article in the Wall Street Journal and hear about your company doing something and not know how that's going to impact your company's financials, which means your stock price. So really, it actually gets down to it's not just great for their business life, it's great for their personal life. It really does generate wealth in families. It is the language of business, and it's also the language of money. So here are some of the specializations, and as I said, there are almost too many to mention anymore, but these are some of the more probably the more popular ones that we see. There's audit, and I actually started out in public company audit, and many of my colleagues there would then roll over into international audit and travel the world doing international or internal audit with an international company. But business valuation, a lot of times people think that's finance. You better understand accounting if you want to do business valuation. There's also cybersecurity. We are seeing a surge in forensic and cybersecurity. Technology is off the charts now. We are technologists. In fact, we are moving towards trying to get STEM legislation for accounting through Congress, because as we always say, we used to use technology to do our jobs. Now our jobs are technology. We can't even begin to think about our jobs without technology. And then there's also managerial and tax.
No, stop doing it again. Of course.
You click down at the bottom left, sometimes and then it'll work.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so these are just some of the certifications and designations by different companies. And trust me, I'm not going to go through these. I just want you to see that if you want to specialize, you want to say, I'm an expert in cybersecurity, then you can go to ISC squared, or, you know, certified public accountant, of course, is the most well-known, CPA, but also there's certified fraud examiner, there's certified valuation analyst. There are so many different ones, financial planning. And then on the next slide, you'll see those are all different organizations. The AICPA also has specialty credentials, and you can see that they have many of the same ones here. So if you're a CPA, and sometimes you don't need to be a CPA to have some of these, there are just so many opportunities. And again, I'm sure that probably a new one has popped up since I've been talking to you. So that it is changing just so quickly. And the reason is because we're seeing our skill sets change so quickly. That is why you're seeing so many more specializations come online. Is because the days of being a generalist are gone. You start out as a generalist, but over your career, they will end up specializing. But one of the most interesting quotes I've ever heard is I heard a partner one time talking, and they said, they were at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and they said, where else but a large public accounting firm could I have had 8 completely different careers with the same firm? Because they just would get interested in something else and move around. So when I say we are seeing all of this change and evolving skill sets, what do I mean? Well, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. So we know the first one was water and steam. The second one was electric power. The third was electronics. And now we are well into the fourth industrial revolution. But what that is really being driven by is the pace of change. And you are seeing it. I know you're seeing it in your high schools. You're probably hearing about it from your students. I found it hard to keep up with my students sometimes. There was such a rapid pace of change, and they were sometimes out ahead of me. But if you go to the next slide, we'll see that in 2007, we actually reached a major inflection point. And Thomas Friedman wrote about this, and thank you for being late. And that inflection point was when the rate of change, the pace of change in technology exceeded humans' ability to adapt. Now think about that. In 2007, the pace of change in technology exceeded a human's ability to adapt. Here we are almost through 2024. I don't think it's slowed down any. So we are so far behind. But what that means is that there are just tremendous opportunities for your students because, again, with this rapid pace of change and all of this new technology comes new opportunities for your students. So here you can see we remain in the foresight. I'm not sure what the next one is, but we started with hindsight if we go back far enough and moved to insight, and now we're at foresight. And now we're actually into Gen AI. So we are working a lot. Karen runs a couple of conferences, but one in particular that really talks a lot about technology and intensive data and analytics. And it's really a technology conference. And we have people return to that every year because it's just so hard to keep up with the change. We're also seeing the functions within our organizations change. So we used to be a very bottom up. So, you sort of had the triangle model where you had people down there working and doing some of the data entry, data analysis, and then you moved up into the performance and then the strategy. But we've kind of flipped that. So if you look at this as where people are working, this is really exciting for accounting majors, because what this means is that because we have technology to do some of that base level stuff that our accountants, I know when I was a young accountant, some of the stuff I did was boring. Let's just be honest. I learned how to work a copier really well my first year. But now what is happening is so many of those things that were more mundane tasks are being done by technology. And you often hear, oh, the need for accountants is going to go down. That's absolutely not true. I get so frustrated when I hear that, because in the reality is that we need more. We just need them operating at a different level. We need them operating more at that middle and higher level. That's why critical thinking skills are so incredibly important. Being able to adapt to change, being resilient is very, very important. Having those technology skills, being technologically agile is so incredibly important, because by the time they learn something in your classes, it's going to change by the time they get to college, and it's going to change again before they start their first job. So they need to know technology, but they also need to be agile. So it's training them to be able to do that and to move between technologies. So here you've got a list, and I know it's probably a little bit hard to see on some of your screens, but these are this is by the World Economic Forum, and it's the top 10 skills. They do this every 5 years. Not surprisingly, the ones over on the far left that are the largest, they are the most recent ones, and they were adopted in fall of 2020. So think about where we were in fall of 2020. So if you go to the next slide, you can see, if you look at 2015 and 2020, there was a lot of overlap. If you look at 2025, what's going to be needed in 2025, you can see some pretty major changes in there. We moved more from complex problem solving, which is still in there, but to more analytical thinking and innovation, leadership. social influence. I love the resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. I'm pretty sure that one came out of being, stressed out in COVID and everybody working at home. But it really is interesting to see the changes. And you can see that these are becoming more higher level skills that are needed, rather than sort of starting at the baseline. Go to the next. So accounting hiring, again, I said I get frustrated when I hear that you're not going to need as many accountants. I actually think we're going to need more accountants. But you can see that they're expected to grow 7% before we even hit 2030, and that's about as fast and exceeds a lot of other occupations. The change is in the skill sets. They need the higher level skill sets. And these young professionals are doing pretty well. So this is something that KPMG shared with us back the end of May. We were so excited to get this because we've been asking for it for a long time from the firms. So the average salary now starting out for an accountant right out of college, it depends on location, and that's why it has the 1 times, 1.5 times. But it's around your larger cities, it's around 75 to 80,000 now. So if you think about that, within 3 to 5 years, they can be making over 100,000. And if you go out to partner at 15 years in today's dollars, not 15 years from now, that's between $500,000 and $600,000. And it varies based on firm. And of course it varies. It doesn't take everybody 15 years to get to partner, and some it takes a little longer. It just depends. But you can see that salaries rapidly ramp up. And so when we say that accounting is the language of money, it's the language of wealth. Working in accounting is also the language of money and the way to wealth. And so that's what we really want our students to understand, is not only can you do anything in accounting, you can work in any area you want to work in. If you like fashion, you can go work for a fashion designer. So you can do about anything, but you're going to make really good money too. And you're going to help yourself personally. So I'm going to stop. I think this is my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Karen. And I know we have some questions too.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. And I want to say, one quote I've heard recently is that AI is not going to replace people. People are going to be replaced by professionals who know how to use AI, not by AI. So that's important to think about. So I want to leave time for questions. I just want to tell you a little bit about the work we've been doing in terms of the pipeline. So we're all aware that there's an issue with the pipeline of accounting students. I think Joe put it in the chat that, students have misperceptions about what the accounting field is, and I would 100% agree with that. And so over a year ago, the stakeholders from anyone you could think would have a stake in this, from high schools to community colleges to the big 4 accounting firms to the AICPA, NABA, NASBA, us, met and had a symposium to talk about what we were going to do, or what we could do to help with the pipeline problem. And from that came this group called FASO, the Future Accountants Sponsoring Organizations. And FASO is 10 organizations that stepped up and said, we will not only give time to this, we will give resources. And it's a list of the big 4, AICPA, AAA, NABA, NASBA, the IMA, and I'm probably leaving someone out, but it's 10 organizations who are really helping with the pipeline problem. When we went to the symposium, we asked people ahead of time, what do you think are the biggest issues we should talk about? And what they said were high schools, community colleges, branding, and the principles course, the introductory accounting course in college. We had a second symposium a year later. We asked the same question and got the very same answers. So out of the symposium and discussions of all the stakeholders came 4 working groups. And these working groups are volunteers from AAA and from professional organizations, helping to think through what kinds of things could we do to make the profession more attractive to students and get more students to understand how great a profession it is. So one of the things we did, a subgroup did, was to go out and talk to faculty around the country about things that they're doing in their classroom that is innovative. And they have documented those best practices, and we're working on getting them all summarized into one place, which I'll show you at the end. The other thing we had this idea to have a principal's boot camp, and it was just last Friday, literally last Friday morning. And we had over 30 faculty attend. We didn't want to take more than 35 because of the kind of thing we were doing. And we had some of the folks we know to be the best faculty at teaching accounting from around the country come and talk about what kinds of things are they doing in their schools and classrooms to interest students who are in the introductory class in accounting in the profession. And I honestly, even though I co-chaired this with a colleague, I couldn't believe the ideas these folks had. You know, anything from an accounting carnival where they literally on open house, they set up basketball hoops and all these other things, but they have an accounting theme, to the career nights, to reaching out to high schools, to just using technology in the classroom in a way that interests students, you know, engages them in the room. It really was really quite fascinating. We've recorded it and it will be available as soon as we get it edited. So those are two of the big things that were going on there. The high school working group is trying to understand what high school teachers need. So if anyone wants to volunteer for an interview, please email me. And they're going to be doing some structured interviews with teachers nationwide to try to understand, you know, what your goals are, what your issues are, what your concerns are. The other thing they did, the high school group and the community college group, was to gather resources for high school students, teachers, parents, etc. What is out there to tell people about the accounting profession? And we have accumulated these resources on one website that I'll show you at the end that everyone has access to, and I would really encourage you to look at it. We also have a community college group that is work together with the high school group on this resource collection. They're also working on, you know, how do you tell career centers, you know, give them the right information for students. And the other thing they're piloting is a mentorship program with the Virginia Society of CPAs to connect professionals to students in community colleges. And depending on how well it works, the idea would be then to use it as a model for other CPA societies. And interestingly, that's the same idea of the Principal's Boot Camp. The idea was to run this boot camp, record it, and then hopefully you could get a faculty member in different cities around the country to use the video and their experience to run it out of a state CPA society's office, because that's a very inexpensive way to do it. People could drive over and go to a 4-hour boot camp. So all of these things we're trying to use as a model to then expand nationwide, just like George was talking about the high school course and the community college program. And last but not least, we've now renamed branding to student attraction, because we realize that this small group of volunteers does not have resources to do a couple of $1 million branding campaign, but they are working on getting student feedback. And they're also working on a pitch sheet, because one of the things we realize is students say, I study accounting, and other students say, oh, sorry to hear that, when there's so many great things going on in accounting. So we're coming up with a pitch sheet to distribute to people, say, this is why you study accounting, and here are all the great things about it. So all of this stuff is going on at the same time. And all of this is being sponsored by that FASO group I referred to originally. The AAA is doing a lot of the administration. I work with a colleague who runs a lot of the meetings and keeps track of everything that's going on. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that we're trying to accumulate all of the resources for everyone in one place. And this is the website where the information is. We are building this website out. We are not done. We're continually adding to it. but it is had a really good start, and it has a lot of information on it for anyone from a high school faculty to a parent to a college faculty to anyone interested in the profession. So I really highly encourage you to take a look at it and ask questions or make suggestions or anything else. There are some questions in the chat. I just wanted to say that all of our email addresses are here. So if you think of something that you want to ask after this discussion, you can always come back and email any one of us, and we would certainly get back to you. So with that, Joe, I think we should go to questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Karen. We appreciate you and the whole team coming in. There's Karen's email. I also dropped it in the chat. And so we have some time for questions if you'd like to put them in the chat or just unmute. We're pretty casual here today. I have a few questions. Karen, George, Yvonne, whoever would like to answer this. It seems like when there's a shortage of professionals like we see maybe even in the world of physicians, you start dividing the tasks up into different tasks. For example, I never knew there were physician assistants before 10 years ago, but now they're everywhere. And now it seems like every time I go to the doctor's office, I'm seeing an assistant. Is there anything like that coming for accountants, do you believe? Do you believe that the accounting profession will continue to somewhat segment based upon skill level? What are your thoughts on that?
George, I know you've had some thoughts on that. Do you want?
I definitely have some thoughts on that. I think the medical model of delivery of service is one that our profession, broadly defined, should be addressing in terms of questions of how it would work, particularly in the public accounting profession. And with the redesigned CPA exam that has 3 parts and a core section, and then a specialty discipline, which is now the 4th part. We're having discussions in the Missouri Society of CPA with the Missouri State Board of Accountancy about potentially licensing, and I use that term very loosely because licensure is a very revered term. It goes way, way back, but licensing or designating or certifying, whatever the proper term, people who pass the first 3 parts in the core areas and giving them some sort of designation to be allowed to perform certain types of services. I think discussion it's not innovative with just the Missouri Society. I think there's discussion going around the country to help people start on that path to becoming a CPA and having milestones that they can see achievement, such as that designation that I'm referring to, and then eventually becoming a full-fledged CPA, licensed to practice.
Thanks, George. Another question is, we've heard a lot of discussion about the AICP, quote, lowering standards because they're too high and people don't want to take essentially the full 150 hours to get an accounting license. For our teachers who are working with students, can you simplify that a little bit for our teachers here today? What's the industry looking at doing there? What do you think about it? I would hate to say that they're lowering standards. I think they're just changing them is probably the better way to look at it. But can you help simplify some of that discussion for our teachers?
I mean, I'm happy to take a first stab at it. So I would call it an alternative pathway. So they're not necessarily changing, they're changing the pathway. So they're changing the way you would be able to get to that 150 hours. And that's probably from what I can tell, and I sit on one state society board and talk to many others, and so does George. From what I can tell, right now, I think they're still trying to figure out what it's going to look like. Different states are at different places. Some are going gung-ho on some alternatives. Others are kind of waiting to see. And I know, well, George, the one you're very involved in, I just heard from Jim that they're sort of taking a slower approach. So I think it's going to take a bit for it to shake out. I also would not say that they're looking at lowering the standards. I think that they just realize that an alternative pathway is probably needed when we start thinking about, wanting to diversify the profession more. If you think about the cost of education, and we run an academic association, but when you think about the cost of education, it's very, very expensive. And there will always be those people who want the masters. But I think what it's going to do from the university side is it's really going to instill in the university that if you're going to have a master's program, you got to show the value proposition. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
The same things happen in business ed. There's with the number of business teachers that have waned, states were having a really hard time finding business teachers. There's always job openings, it seems. So what they did is, in most states, they didn't cease requiring a certification, but they changed the pathway. So oftentimes now you no longer have to get a master's. You don't have to go certify to teach at a college or university, but you do have to have work experience and a degree and document some type of experience. So really, just like you said, it's really a pathway change. And I think that that's what's happening all over, including what you just stated. I think there's some striking similarities there. Any other questions? Let's take some. I've got one more question here in the cache, but if there's any other questions, this is the time to talk. Anything you would, if we've also provided Karen's email if you'd like to be a part of any of those work groups that she had mentioned. So feel free to email her directly if you'd like. I'm really looking forward to spending some time at the futureofaccountants.org. That seems like a great website. I think, and that's your website, is that correct? It's just your group that is putting that together to help promote the accounting profession and help people and teachers really understand what the future of accounting looks like. Is that correct? Did I gather that properly?
Yes, it's FASO's. So the AAA is hosting it, but it really is FASO that it's representative of the efforts of the group that I'm keeping.
Of the FASO group. Got it. Okay, sounds good. Last question. So we have teachers, our teachers, are grappling with AI, and that seems like to be the hot topic. Karen, you alluded to AI. You're going to need accountants that know AI, but accountants aren't going to be replaced by AI. Could you, and then we have another question from Carrie. Could you talk just a little bit about the AI and what should our teachers be instilling into their students as far as AI and accounting goes? What would you think?
Okay, well, this actually is a great question, and it's come up a lot in some of the workshops I do with teachers on how to be the best you can be in the classroom. In the beginning, I think we saw a lot of faculty, and still today we probably do, saying, you just can't use it. They just told their students, sorry, you can't use it. And what we've tried to talk to faculty about is they're going to use it. So teach them to use it responsibly. And what the firms are saying, a lot of the accounting firms are saying, is that obviously, if you don't use the right question or the right prompt, you're not going to get particularly good information back. So teach your students how to use prompts properly, how to cite where you got the information, not to just go to AI and throw it in a paper and it's not yours. And I think most importantly, that we have to teach students that AI is not always going to give us the right answer. AI has been known to give citations of papers that don't exist. So the most important thing students need to know how to do is to make sure that what they're getting is accurate and not just believe what AI is telling them. So I don't think it's a bad thing to use it. I think the big issue is using it responsibly.
Yeah, the other day I used it to measure probability on a list of an input list, and I still had to know that I needed a probability declaration as opposed to I still had to know that, and I learned that in college statistics. Carrie Largo had a question. Carrie, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead with your question.
Perfect. Thank you. It's kind of a two-part question, but it's pretty quick, hopefully. So in talking to teachers that had gone to the session, the MBA Accounting and Personal Finance, which I wish I could have gone to, they had heard from several professors that, a direction of teaching accounting was started moving away from debits and credits, and something alluded to earlier in the presentation about the decision-making and the financial statements. So I guess my question is, one, what are you hearing? Is that advice for teachers that we should start listening to? And two, how do high school teachers keep up with the latest trends and what is happening in the field of accounting? Thank you.
I don't mind starting the answer to that. And boy, it's so funny that your second question is wonderful, because I was going to ask you guys a question and you just led me to it. So the answer to your first question is a number of schools are going to away from debits and credits and more talking about increases and decreases. There's the focus definitely is on decision making and analyzing the data. You're absolutely right. But a lot of faculty are starting to get away from debits and credits and talk about increases and decreases. Now, in college, what they're doing, if they do that in the intro course, and a student then has to go on to take intermediate accounting, which is, the hardest sequence, the guts of accounting, they're putting in a bridge course. And the bridge course is an intensive debits and credits course, because if you go into intermediate not understanding debits and credits, it's very hard to be successful. So I think the good thing is that if they use increases and decreases and not debits and credits, and that is more clear to students, hopefully it will introduce more students to the profession. They won't be so worried about the debits and credits. And that is a tricky thing in principals. They get really caught up in debits and credits. Now, to your question of how to keep teachers and faculty in the high schools more engaged, one of the things we were thinking about in our working group was, what if we started developing a series of webinars for high school teachers, about what's going on in the profession, best practices in teaching principals? Because if you're teaching accounting in the high school, you're really preparing them for principals. So some of the best practices we're using, you would want to use, and you could probably tell us some of your best practices as well, I might add. So I'm seeing some nice comments on that. So I will take this back to our high school group, because our high school group started talking about, not only would that be a good way for us to share, but also as a high school faculty, you need continuing ed kinds of credits for your own licenses and certifications and development. So maybe we could provide that to you via the AAA.